Well, I knew my first day in the legislature would be historic, but I'm very sad that this is the reason it's historic. So I want to be very clear. This bill, the first use in history in Alberta of the notwithstanding clause, the first time an Alberta premier has ever dared to say, we don't care about the Charter of Rights, that we know what we're doing is blatantly unconstitutional and we don't care, happened today. I have a lot to say about public education. I have a lot to say about why this was wrong. But I want to highlight that this is a premier who consistently calls herself the most freedom-loving politician in Canada. And she is the first premier in Alberta history to say, I don't care about the Charter of Rights. And she's not even here. She buggered off to the Middle East, didn't even stick around for the votes, will not take responsibility for being the first premier to violate the Charter of Rights. She couldn't delay her Middle Eastern vacation by one day to at least show up in front of Albertans and take responsibility for this disgusting piece of legislation. I'm telling you today that when the Alberta New Democrats are in power, we will never use the notwithstanding clause because we believe rights matter, and we believe rights matter for everyone. This was entirely avoidable. We've known for 2 years that the teachers would not accept a deal that didn't include something on class size and complexity. Government chose to do nothing. We knew in the spring that the teachers had rejected the deal because it didn't include class sizes. The government had all summer to get to work and to make a deal they would accept. They did nothing. They went on summer vacation. They came back in the fall. They offered the teachers the same deal they had already rejected, just with COVID shots added. They thought the teachers would change their mind over a $100 COVID shot that should be free for everybody anyway. What did they think was going to happen? Of course the teachers rejected it. The government didn't come back to the table. They never tried to make a deal because they always knew that this is what they were going to do. So let's be clear. The government engineered this strike. You want to blame someone for your kids being out of school for 4 weeks? Don't blame the teachers, blame the government. They engineered this strike. The government always knew they were going to use this constitutional hammer. And Albertans should be very worried. Whose rights are going to be next? Earlier this summer, the Premier and her government intervened in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, saying that Quebec should have the right to restrict jobs to people from religious minority groups. Who's next? Well, we know who's next. Why am I asking that question? The Premier decided to use this on workers so that the very first time she used the notwithstanding clause wasn't on vulnerable children. We know they're next. We know healthcare workers come after that. We know that this Premier is going to use this clause over and over and over again because she's not the most freedom-loving politician in the history of Canada. She's the most authoritarian Premier in the history of Canada. And the fact that she couldn't even stand up in the House and defend herself is absolutely shocking, and every single Albertan should be livid. So what happens now? Well, on Wednesday, tomorrow, parents are going to end up doing the laundry and finding those workbooks and finding the gym shoes and getting ready for Halloween costumes on Friday. And the kids are going to go back to exactly the same problems. Overcrowded classrooms, incredible complexity, an education system that is funded the least in Canada, and an absolute dereliction of Peter Lougheed's dream that we should have the best public education in Canada. This doesn't solve anything. And in addition, the Premier will rue the day this happened because we have woken up Albertans. We've woken up Albertans that this is not a conservative government. This is an authoritarian government. This is not a government that's interested in solving problems. It's a government that is interested in helping itself. And if the Premier thinks that this is all over tonight, if the Premier thinks that by the time she gets back from her desert vacation, things are going to be just fine, she's got another thing coming. I spoke to teachers and parents on Friday night who said to me, when I said, I'm so sorry for what's about to happen, and I'm so sorry that no matter what we do, we're not going to be able to stop it. The best we can do is delay it by a day or two. And a teacher said to me, standing next to a parent who agreed, oh, you're wrong. This is not over. Because this Premier has woken us up. And from now until the next provincial election and from then on in, we are going to be fighting for what's right. We're going to be fighting for education, and we're going to be fighting against this government. The Premier has woken up parents, she's woken up teachers, she's woken up students, she's woken up workers, she's woken up everybody who wants a better Alberta, and she is going to rue the day that she did this. The final thing I'm going to say is, even if the government needed to force the teachers back to work, they had many tools to do it. They could have not had legislation at all. Under the existing Labor Relations Code, she could have just forced them back to work and demanded arbitration. She could have put in legislation, as has been done before, without the notwithstanding clause, and let the courts make a decision, which wouldn't have happened for months and years, and a better deal would have come into place anyway. Why did the Premier do this? She did it because she wants to be a bully. Because as always, she'd rather fight than win, and she wanted the fight. And Albertans deserve so much better than a Premier who just fights. They deserve a Premier who wins, and a Premier who builds up Alberta, and I hope that I can be that Premier. We'll go to questions.
The Premier says the unique nature of teacher bargaining in the two phases, the central table then the local, is what necessitated the use of the notwithstanding clause, and she can't see it applying to other labor groups. What are your thoughts on that? I'm
going to go to Deputy Leader Pancholi in a second, but let me just say, the Premier created this. The government created this unique nature of bargaining by forming the Teacher-Employer Bargaining Association. They always knew that this would happen and they always had a way to get out of it. Do you want to continue, Rakhi?
Yeah, I'll just add, the argument that the government needs to use the notwithstanding clause because of the unique nature of collective bargaining for teachers in Alberta is a complete farce. The notwithstanding clause does not do anything to make a difference or direct any actors when it comes to local bargaining or central bargaining. The only thing the notwithstanding clause does is protect the UCP. It protects them from being told by the courts that they have unreasonably and unjustifiably breached the rights and freedoms of Albertans. They are only using this to protect themselves, and they're using it to show that they can crush individuals' rights and freedoms, including the right to collective bargaining, but as we know, there's going to be many more to come. The only purpose to do this is to show that she prioritizes her government's protection over the rights and freedoms of individual Albertans.
Actually, if I'm going to jump in on that again for a moment, I am a bit of a constitutional nerd. So I'll add one other thing based on what Rakhi is saying. And Rakhi's the lawyer, she knows what she's talking about. The Premier has many, many times said that she believes in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and that the courts are supreme. The notwithstanding clause was designed to be used after the courts threw something out. It was used to be said, all right, the courts have said this is unconstitutional, but we think there's a real reason we have to do it. Peter Naheed was the architect of the notwithstanding clause. And later today, I'll be talking about his vision for the clause, which is very much it can never be used preemptively. By using it preemptively, she is admitting that this is unconstitutional. She's admitting it, and she's saying she doesn't care. So this is a premier who said, even when she put the Sovereignty, whatever the hell it's called, Sovereignty in United Alberta Act, that she would listen to the courts. And now she's saying she couldn't care less about the courts and her rule should be supreme before the courts even get a chance to say anything. It is disgusting. And frankly, Danielle Smith of 3 years ago would have found it disgusting. Anyone else?
En français?
Oui.
L'utilisation de la clause dérogatoire par le gouvernement, quel est votre commentaire là-dessus?
C'est dégueulasse. C'est vraiment la première fois dans l'histoire d'Alberta qu'un gouvernement avait le, I'm going to say the temerity, right? The guts de faire ça. Et ce n'est pas quelque chose qu'il va falloir faire. Parce qu'il y avait beaucoup de choses, beaucoup d'occasions pour fixer ce problème sans cette loi. Et c'est absolument dégueulasse. Et Albertains ont le droit d'être très, très, très en colère sur ce gouvernement. All right. Thank you, everybody. And do stay tuned. We're going to have a bit of a barn burner right after the break here.